my daughter proudly declared. You will never compare to my mother-in-law. And before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Her words felt like a shard of ice, lodging in my heart. It was a cruel comparison. The perfect, sophisticated mother-in-law versus a simple mother who had quietly built a life for her family. One beam and one board at a time. The perfect mother-in-law versus a simple mother who had silently supported the family for years. I stood up, my own dining chair scraping harshly against the floor, and I replied, "Will she pay your bills? Because I'm not sending you any more money." My son-in-law's face was a mask of shock. "What money? We haven't received a cent from you." What I discovered in the moments that followed shook me to my core. The fork trembled in my hand as my daughter Megan's laughter echoed through the dining room. Rain drummed a relentless rhythm against the window panes. But the storm raging outside felt like a gentle spring shower compared to the tempest brewing at my own table. "Eleanor always knows exactly what to do," my son-in-law Leo said, cutting his roasted chicken with movements that were precise and confident. When that shipping delay happened last month, she had it all solved in 2 phone calls. I watched my daughter nod eagerly, her eyes shining with a hero worship I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked on, a steady, indifferent metronome marking time I would never get back. That's the difference between real business vision and... Megan gestured vaguely around my dining room, her hand sweeping over the solid oak furniture I'd built with my own 2 hands, the cherished family photos that watched us from their frames. Her unspoken meaning hung in the air like acrid smoke. "And what?" The words emerged from my mouth sharper than I'd intended. Leo glanced between us, a flicker of unease in his eyes, sensing the sudden shift in the emotional climate. "Carol, the dinner is wonderful. Thank you for cooking," he offered, trying to smooth things over. But Megan was already warming to her favorite theme. Eleanor sees the big picture. She doesn't get stuck thinking small. She speared a piece of roasted potato with her fork, like this logistics expansion she's planning. That's how you really help people, by creating opportunities. My jaw tightened. The green beans I had so carefully steamed just an hour ago suddenly tasted like ash in my mouth. I had spent 3 hours preparing this meal. A simple gesture born from a deep-seated hope for one quiet evening of family peace. "Your mother works hard, too," Leo said softly, his voice a gentle defense, but even his tone carried the same unconscious dismissal I'd been hearing for months, a subtle condescension that stung like 1,000 paper cuts. "Sure. But it's construction," Megan shrugged, as if dismissing my entire life's work. "Eleanor's building an empire. Real legacy stuff." The napkin in my lap crumpled into a tight ball within my fist. 37 years of building homes, of creating something tangible and permanent, something that I believed mattered. Apparently, all of that was nothing compared to the abstract concept of moving boxes around warehouses. "Eleanor offered me the regional manager position," Megan continued, her chest puffing out with a pride that was clearly borrowed from her mother-in-law. "Says I have natural leadership potential." Natural leadership? I almost let out a bitter laugh. If only Eleanor knew where Megan's potential had actually led her. "That's wonderful, honey," Leo beamed at his wife, completely oblivious. "Your mother always knows how to spot talent. Always knows. Always sees. Always solves." Eleanor Wilson, the flawless mother-in-law who could do no wrong. A paragon of modern success. I set down my fork with deliberate care, afraid that the pressure building inside me might cause me to snap it in half. "She's even talking about grooming me for a partnership eventually," Megan went on, her voice filled with ambition. "Says she needs someone she can trust completely." Trust completely? The irony was a bitter pill I could barely swallow. "Must be nice having someone who believes in you that much," I said, my voice quiet, but laced with an edge I couldn't hide. Megan missed the undertone entirely. That's just Eleanor. She's a natural mentor. Some people have it, some don't. The clock ticked louder in the ensuing silence. Rain pattered insistently against the glass. Somewhere in the house, the old heating system hummed to life. A futile attempt to warm a room that had grown impossibly cold. She's teaching me about strategic thinking, Megan continued, her enthusiasm unabated. Long-term planning. Real business philosophy. Real business, I repeated, the words tasting like metal. You know what I mean, Mom. Eleanor operates on a different level. She thinks bigger. Leo nodded enthusiastically in agreement. Remember when she restructured that whole Northwest division? Brilliant. Brilliant Eleanor. Perfect Eleanor. Eleanor who could solve anything, see everything, build empires, while I was apparently just playing with blocks in the dirt. Some people just have that executive mindset, Megan said, leaning back in her chair, as if she were already practicing for a seat in the boardroom. The ability to make tough decisions, to really lead, I added, my voice dangerously soft. Unlike others. Well? Megan shrugged, her meaning hanging in the air, sharp and clear. The silence stretched, tight as a high-tension wire. Even Leo seemed to sense he'd wandered into a minefield, but Megan, flushed with her mother-in-law's praise and her own inflated sense of importance, couldn't let it go. Face it, Mom, she said, her voice growing louder, more confident with every word. You'll never measure up to my mother-in-law. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I had installed myself 30 years ago. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Megan sat there, triumphant and utterly oblivious, while Leo's face had gone pale with shock. The rain kept falling. The clock kept ticking. And something deep inside of me, something I thought was unbreakable, went very, very cold. I stood there, my knuckles white as I gripped the back of my chair, Megan's words echoing in the cavern of my mind. You'll never measure up. The phrase was a key, unlocking a vault of memories I had tried to keep buried deep. 2 years ago, Megan sitting across from me at my desk in the home office. Her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white, her eyes darting everywhere but at mine. Mom, we just need to get through this month. Her voice had been smaller then, thin and laced with embarrassment. There was this unexpected expense with the apartment, and my paycheck got delayed. I had written the check for 2-0 without a moment's hesitation. My daughter needed help. That's what mothers did. This is temporary, she'd promised, folding the check with meticulous care. Just until I get back on my feet. 3 months later she was back. This time, it was car repairs and a sudden spike in utilities. 3-0. Her stories were becoming more elaborate, her explanations more frantic and desperate. Leo doesn't know how tight things are, she'd whispered that time, leaning closer as if sharing a state secret. I don't want to worry him. You understand, right? Mom to daughter? I understood. I understood that my daughter was struggling and was too proud to let her husband see it. So, I opened my checkbook again. By the 4th visit, a grim routine had settled in. Megan would call first, gingerly testing the waters. Hey Mom, could we talk sometime this week? Then she'd appear at my door with another manufactured crisis, another dire emergency that only a cash infusion could solve. I started keeping better records. Not because I didn't trust her, but because the amounts were getting larger, more frequent. 2, 500 one month. 3, 200 the next. I wanted to track it all, maybe to help her see the pattern, to figure out where the money was actually disappearing. The advent of online banking made it easier, more discreet, no more checks, No more paper trails she might accidentally leave where Leo could find them. Just silent, digital transfers from my business account to her personal account, every month like clockwork. Eleanor's helping with career stuff, Megan had explained during one of our last hushed conversations. But we need some cash flow help until the new position kicks in. Eleanor was helping with career advice. I was helping with everything else. 75, 0, over 3 years. I knew the exact number because I had calculated it just last week. Sitting in that very office, staring at the bank statements spread across my desk like a final, damning verdict. 75, 0 of my sweat, my labor, my careful, hard-won savings. Money I'd earned hauling lumber, mixing concrete, and working 14-hour days to build something lasting. All of it had vanished into the black hole Megan referred to as her temporary setbacks. The last transfer had been just 3 weeks ago. $800. Because her rent had supposedly gone up, and there was some confusing issue with her health insurance. Another emergency. Another fervent promise that this was the absolute last time. I really appreciate this, Mom, she'd said over the phone, her voice earnest. I know you don't have to do this. Family helps family, right? Family helps family. I blinked. The memory dissolving as I returned to the tense present moment in my dining room. Megan was still sitting there, bathed in the glow of her mother-in-law's approval, completely unaware that the perfect, fragile world she had constructed was about to come crashing down around her. Leo was staring at me now, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. Carol, are you all right? The rain outside seemed louder now, more insistent, as if demanding a resolution. The warm light from the dining room chandelier felt harsh and interrogating against my eyes. Everything in the room looked different, sharper, as if a filter had been removed. And I was seeing it all for the first time. 25 payments. 75. 0. 3 years of being the silent, secret bank, while Eleanor received all the credit for being the generous, brilliant mentor. My grip tightened on the chair back. All those months of careful planning, of budgeting my own expenses so I could help my daughter. All those times I'd chosen not to buy something I wanted because Megan needed help more than I needed comfort. And this was my thanks. This casual, brutal dismissal. I looked at Megan's face, still flushed with that borrowed pride, and I felt something fundamental shift deep inside me. The hurt was still there, a raw, open wound, but underneath it, something harder was forming, colder. You'll never measure up. We would see about that. I straightened my spine slowly, letting the full weight of those 3 years of deception settle into my bones. The rain hammered against the windows now, demanding to be heard. Megan sat there, smugly satisfied with her little speech, while Leo watched me with a growing sense of alarm. You think Eleanor will take care of you? My voice came out steady, controlled, and deadly quiet. Megan blinked, some of her self-assurance faltering. What's that supposed to mean? It's a simple question. I began to walk around the table, my footsteps deliberate and loud on the hardwood floor. When Eleanor stops being useful to you, when the job doesn't work out the way you planned, who's going to pay your bills? Mom, what are you talking about? Because I won't be sending you money anymore. The words landed with the force of a sledgehammer. Megan's face cycled through a series of emotions. It went white, then a blotchy red, then white again. The sharp clatter of Leo's fork hitting his plate was the only sound in the room. A sudden metallic shriek that broke the spell. What money? Leo's voice cracked with bewilderment. We haven't received a penny from you. The silence that followed was dense and beautiful. Megan's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The grandfather clock ticked on, each second marking another moment of her escalating panic. Megan. Leo turned to his wife, his brow furrowed in confusion. What is she talking about? Megan's hands were shaking now. It's not what you think. What's not what I think? Leo's voice rose. sharp with disbelief. Carol just said she's been sending us money. What money, Megan? I crossed my arms over my chest and waited. This was a grim, delicious kind of justice. 3 years of carefully constructed lies were about to unravel in the span of mere minutes. There might have been some small, temporary, Megan stammered, her eyes darting towards me. How much? Leo demanded, his voice flat. Megan looked at me desperately, her eyes silently begging me to let it go, to preserve whatever shred of dignity she had left. It was the same look she'd given me as a child, when she'd broken a vase and hoped I wouldn't tell her father. 75. 0. I said calmly. Leo's gasp echoed through the quiet room. 75? What? Over 3 years, I continued, keeping my voice conversational, as if I were discussing the weather. Monthly payments, sometimes more when she had special emergencies. Car repairs, rent increases, utility bills, unexpected medical expenses, always something. Megan, Leo's voice had gone deadly quiet. Is this true? Megan's face crumpled. Leo. I can explain. 7,500,000 yuan, he repeated, standing up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. While I've been worried sick about our finances, while I've been taking extra shifts at the firm and cutting back on everything I could think of, it wasn't supposed to be that much, Megan whispered, a pathetic defense. Where did it go? The question came from both of us at the same time. Leo and I stared at Megan, waiting for an answer we both suddenly, desperately needed. Megan's mouth worked soundlessly. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead despite the cool evening air. She looked around the room as if searching for an escape route, but there was nowhere to run. Megan. Leo's voice was ice. Where did the money go? Outside, a flash of lightning illuminated the dining room in a stark, revealing white light for a fraction of a second. In that flash, I saw everything with perfect clarity. My daughter's terror, my son, in-law's betrayal, and my own cold, grim satisfaction. The thunder that followed seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Megan opened her mouth to speak, and I leaned forward, eager to hear what new lie she would try to spin. But more than that, I was eager to watch it all fall apart, because this was just the beginning. I can explain. Megan's voice cracked, sounding like an adolescent's. Leo leaned forward, his knuckles white against the edge of the dining table. Then explain. Where did 75-0 go? The silence stretched for so long that even the grandfather clock seemed to hold its breath. Megan's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound emerged. It's complicated. No. Leo's voice cut through the air like a knife. It's simple. You took money from your mother. Where did it go? Megan's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. The ice cubes clinked against the sides like small bones rattling in a cage. There were some investments. They didn't work out. What investments? I kept my voice level. A detached, clinical curiosity. Online trading platforms. Leo's face went pale. Trading? Since when do you know anything about trading? Megan's carefully constructed facade began to crumble, piece by piece. Sweat beaded on her forehead, glistening in the dim light despite the cool evening air seeping through the windows. I was trying to build something for us. For our future. What kind of trading? Leo pressed, his voice relentless. Different things, stocks, options. Her voice grew smaller and smaller with each word. Megan. Leo stood slowly, towering over her, even though he was the shorter of the two. Look at me and tell me the truth. Megan finally met his eyes, and in that moment, something inside her broke. It wasn't trading, she admitted, the words hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. Then what was it? Poker sites. Online casinos. The words tumbled out of her in a frantic rush. I thought I could win it back quickly. Double it, maybe triple it. Give you everything you deserved. Leo stepped back as if she had physically struck him. Gambling? You've been gambling with our future? It wasn't supposed to be gambling. I had a system. 7,500,000 yuan. Leo's voice rose, bordering on hysteria. How long has this been going on? 2 years. Maybe 3. Maybe 3? Leo laughed. But there was no humor in it. Only a raw, ragged pain. You don't even know how long you've been lying to me. Megan tried to stand, but her legs seemed to buckle beneath her. Leo, listen. I'm done listening. He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair where he'd left it. I'm done with all of this. Where are you going? Away from you. He turned to me, his eyes red, rimmed but dry. Carol, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I just nodded. I know you didn't. Megan finally managed to stand, swaying slightly. Mom, if you could just... No. The word came out harder and colder than I intended. Figure out your problems, Megan. But not in my house. You're throwing me out? You threw yourself out the moment you chose gambling over your family. Megan's face cycled through a storm of emotions. Desperation, anger, shame, and then back to raw desperation. I can stop. I will stop. Then do it somewhere else. Leo was already at the front door, his car keys in his hand. Megan stumbled after him, making pathetic, pleading sounds. Leo. Wait. We can work this out. He didn't turn around. Work what out, Megan? The lies? The addiction? The fact that you've been stealing from your mother for 3 years? I wasn't stealing. What would you call it? Megan had no answer for that. I followed them to the entryway, watching my daughter's life implode in real time. The cold night air rushed in when Leo opened the door, carrying the clean scent of rain and damp earth. I'll call you tomorrow, Megan said desperately. We'll figure this out. Leo walked to their car without a single look back. Megan stood in my doorway for a long moment, searching my face for any sign of softness, any hint of a reprieve. Mom, good night, Megan. I closed the door and listened as their car started, its engine roaring to life before it drove away into the night. The house felt different already, quieter, sadder, but also cleaner, somehow. The dinner dishes still sat on the table, the food now long cold. I looked at the mess and decided it could wait until morning. Some things needed time to settle. 2 hours later, I sat on my back deck, with a glass of whiskey and a neat pile of bank statements. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air crisp and clear. Stars began to peek through the breaking clouds, like scattered diamonds on black velvet. I had tried to sleep, but my mind kept circling back, replaying Megan's confession. 75. 0. 3 years of my careful, loving support, all poured down the drain of her hidden addiction. The bank statements told the grim story in cold, unforgiving numbers. January 2022, 20. March 2022, 500. By the end of that year, the monthly transfers had become a dark, secret routine. My accountant had probably wondered about the unusual pattern but had been too polite to ask. I sipped the whiskey and felt its slow burn begin to dissolve some of the evening's bitterness. The deck chair creaked under my weight, a familiar, comforting sound I'd grown to love over the years. I'd built this deck myself, just like I'd built most of the house. I remembered 1995. Megan was 5 years old then, more interested in playing with wood shavings than in the actual construction. She'd followed me around with her little plastic hammer, helping by banging on scraps of lumber. When I'm big, I'll build houses too, Mommy, she had declared. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else's life. A story from a distant, happier past. I spread the statements across the small patio table, using my phone's flashlight to read the damning details. Each transfer was labeled the same way. Family support. Such innocent words for what had become a toxic system of enablement. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, indifferent to human failure. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed through the valley, a lonely, mournful sound. The lights of Seattle twinkled on the horizon like a sprawling, complex circuit board. All those lives, intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to ever fully understand. Megan was probably home by now, facing Leo's righteous anger and her own suffocating shame. A part of me, the mother in me, wanted to call her, to find some way to fix this catastrophic mess. But I knew that impulse was exactly what had created the problem in the first place. I had taught her that money could solve anything, that mom would always be there to clean up her mistakes. Every single transfer had reinforced that destructive lesson, making her weaker instead of stronger. The whiskey glass was empty. I considered refilling it but decided I needed clarity more than I needed comfort. What would happen if I kept sending money? Megan would gamble it away, probably faster each time. Her addiction would grow stronger, not weaker. And eventually, she'd lose everything anyway, including her marriage. But what if I stopped? The question hung in the cold night air like my own visible breath. If I cut off the money completely, Megan would be forced to face real, unavoidable consequences for the first time in years. She'd have to choose between her addiction and her life. That choice might save her, or it might utterly destroy her. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Megan's contact. One call, one offer of financial help, and this could all be smoothed over. At least for a while. Instead, I put the phone away and looked up at the vast, uncaring stars again. My own mother had built houses too, back in a day when construction meant something different. She'd worked with her hands until they were permanently stained with sawdust and paint. When I was Megan's age, she'd pulled me aside one day and said something I had never forgotten. Honey, the only thing you really own in this world is what you earn yourself. Everything else is just borrowed time. I had built this house for Megan, dreamed of the day I would pass it down to her, of watching her children play in the same backyard where she had grown up. But maybe that dream was selfish. Maybe what Megan needed wasn't an inheritance, but an incentive. The cold was seeping through my jacket now, a sharp reminder that even a spring night in Seattle demanded respect. I gathered the bank statements and stood up slowly, my knees protesting the movement. Inside, the house felt warm and welcoming. I locked the back door, turned off the deck light, and then made my way to the kitchen. My old address book sat in the junk drawer where it had lived for 20 years. I flipped through the worn pages until I found what I was looking for. Mary Lawson, attorney at law. Tomorrow, I would make some calls. Tonight, I would try to sleep. But first, I would make a decision that might change everything. The next morning brought a flood of sunshine through my kitchen windows, painting everything in a cheerful, almost mocking yellow light. I sat at the table with my coffee and the newspaper, trying my best to pretend this was just another ordinary day. The phone rang at 10:30 a.m., right as I was reading about the city council's latest budget proposals. Megan's name appeared on the caller ID. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but a grim curiosity won out. "Hello, Megan?" "Mom!" Her voice sounded rough and scraped, as if she'd been awake all night. "About last night. I know things got heated." "Heated is one word for it," I said, sipping my coffee. I wanted to apologize for the things I said. The comparison to Eleanor, that wasn't fair. A pause hung on the line. I waited. Megan had always been good at apologies. They came easy to her, smooth as silk, and just as insubstantial. I also wanted to explain about the money situation. "It's not what you think." "What do I think?" "Well," she seemed to lose her momentum. I mean, it sounds worse than at Island. 75-0 in gambling losses. How, exactly, does that sound better? It's not all gone. Her voice picked up speed. A frantic, desperate energy fueling her words. Some of it I can get back. There are these techniques. Strategies. Megan. No, listen. I've been studying the systems, the odds. If I could just get a stake together, maybe 5-0 to start? No. The single word hit her like a physical blow. I could hear her breathing change on the other end of the line. A sharp, wounded intake of air. Mom, please. I can make this right. The only way to make this right is to stop gambling. I have stopped. Last night was a wake-up call, but I need to get back what I lost. For Leo's sake. I closed my eyes, exhausted by the same circular, addictive logic that had trapped her for 3 long years. Where's Leo now? At work. He's pretty upset. I imagine he Island. That's why I need to fix this quickly. Before he does something drastic. Something in her tone made me sit up straighter. What kind of something? He mentioned lawyers. Divorce lawyers. The word hung between us like a guillotine blade. Maybe that's not the worst idea, I said quietly. Mom! Her voice cracked. You can't mean that. I mean that he deserves better than being married to an active gambler. But I'm not active anymore, I told you. Then get professional help. What kind of professional help? Addiction counseling. Gamblers Anonymous. Residential treatment if necessary. I don't need. That's the only help I'm offering, Megan. Treatment. Not money. The silence on the line stretched for so long that I wondered if she had hung up. Eleanor won't help either, she said finally, her voice small and defeated. You asked Eleanor for money? Yesterday, before dinner, she admitted, her voice thick with shame. She turned me down flat. Said I needed to figure this out myself. Smart woman. So, you're both against me. We're both against your gambling. It's the same thing. No, Megan, it's not. I could hear her breathing heavily, working herself up into a rage. Fine. If that's how you want to play it. This isn't a game, isn't it? Her voice turned ugly, dripping with bitterness. Rich old woman, teaching her daughter a lesson, making her beg. Megan, you'll regret this. Both of you will regret this. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the monotonous dial tone. Then I set the phone down carefully and reached for my address book. Mary Lawson answered on the second ring. Mary, it's Carol Riley. I need to discuss some changes to my will. 3 days passed before I could bring myself to make the appointment. I spent those days researching inheritance law online. My screen filled with articles about conditional wills and bitter family disputes. The deeper I dug, the more certain I became that decisive legal action was my only remaining option. Mary Lawson's office occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming glass tower downtown, offering panoramic views of Elliott Bay that stretched all the way to the Olympic Mountains. I'd known Mary for over 15 years, ever since she'd helped me incorporate my construction business. Her large mahogany desk bore the comfortable clutter of a successful, long-standing practice. Stacks of law books, client files, and a silver coffee service that spoke of established relationships. Carol, she stood as her assistant showed me in, extending a firm, no-nonsense handshake. It's been too long. Though, I have to say, your call sounded urgent. It is urgent. I settled into the plush leather chair across from her desk. I need to change my will. Mary's eyebrows rose slightly. May I ask why? The last version we drafted seemed quite comprehensive. My daughter has a gambling addiction. The words hung in the quiet, professional air between us. Mary's expression shifted immediately from professional curiosity to genuine, human concern. I'm so sorry to hear that. How serious? serious enough that she's gambled away 75,000 of my money over the past 3 years. Mary reached for a legal pad, her movements measured and deliberate. Money you gave her directly? Monthly support payments. She claimed she needed help with living expenses. I looked out the expansive window at the bustling city below. Turns out she was feeding an online casino habit. Have you confronted her about this? Last week? She admitted everything. Then she called me 3 days later, demanding more money to fix the situation. Mary wrote notes in a precise, elegant handwriting. What kind of changes are you considering? I want to make her inheritance conditional on getting clean. That's possible, she said. Washington state allows for performance-based inheritance terms, provided they're specific and measurable. A wave of relief flooded through me. I had hoped for this answer. But hearing it from Mary, my trusted attorney, made it feel real and solid. What would you recommend? Mary leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen thoughtfully against the legal pad. Completion of a certified addiction treatment program would be the most legally defensible requirement. Inpatient rehabilitation, followed by a verifiable period of abstinence. How long? For a gambling addiction? I would recommend a minimum 6-month treatment program, followed by 1 full year of documented sobriety. And if she refuses, then you designate an alternative beneficiary. Many clients in this situation choose charitable organizations related to the addiction issue. I thought about Megan's threats on the phone. The ugly, entitled tone she had taken when I'd refused to enable her any longer. There's a Gamblers Anonymous Foundation here in Seattle. Perfect. That creates a clear, undeniable incentive structure, Mary confirmed. She either gets help and inherits, or the money goes to help other addicts. Mary's assistant knocked and entered with a tray of fresh coffee. We paused while she served us, the brief interruption giving me a moment to process the profound implications of this decision. What about my son-in-law, Leo? He's innocent in all of this. We can include a separate provision for him, Mary suggested. A fixed amount, disbursed regardless of your daughter's compliance. 50,000, I said without hesitation. Mary made another note. That's very generous. He's a good man. He doesn't deserve to suffer for her choices. This is clearly a difficult decision, Carol, Mary said gently, her professional demeanor softening. Are you absolutely certain this is the path you want to take? Family estrangements can become permanent. I thought about Megan's voice on the phone, the entitlement, the anger, the immediate pivot to threats when I'd offered real help instead of easy money. I've been enabling her for 3 years, Mary. It has to stop. Then we'll draft something ironclad. I'll need details about the specific treatment requirements, verification procedures, and timeline considerations. How long will this take? 2 days for the initial draft. We can schedule the signing for later this week if you'd like. I nodded, feeling the heavy weight of my decision settle into a strange kind of certainty. Do it. Mary walked me to the elevator, her expression thoughtful. Carol, you're doing this out of love, not anger. Remember that when things get difficult. The elevator doors slid shut on her words, but they followed me all the way home. 2 days later, I returned to Mary's office for the formal signing. The conference room felt different from her personal office. More sterile, more final. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the legal documents spread across the long mahogany table like evidence in a high-stakes trial. Mary had assembled everything with her usual precision. Linda Chen, the notary public, sat quietly at one end of the table with her official stamp and record book. 2 witnesses, Mary's assistant and a building security officer, waited nearby, looking suitably solemn. Before we begin, Mary said, her voice clear and formal, I want to review the key provisions one last time. She lifted the document, her voice taking on the formal cadence of a legal reading. The inheritance, designated for Megan Riley, is contingent upon her successful completion of a certified gambling addiction treatment program. Minimum duration of 6 months. to be followed by 1 year of verified abstinence from all forms of gambling, both online and in person. Yes. The words sounded harsh in the sterile room, but I felt only relief. If these conditions are not met within 5 years of your death, Mary continued, the entirety of her designated estate will transfer to the Seattle Gamblers Anonymous Foundation and the provision for your son-in-law. Leo Wilson will receive a one-time payment of $50,000, regardless of Megan's compliance or non-compliance with the rehabilitation requirements. Linda, the notary, looked up from her paperwork. Miss Riley, do you understand the contents of this document? I do. And are you signing this of your own free will, without coercion or undue influence? I am. The formality felt necessary, appropriate. This wasn't a casual family decision. It was a legal restructuring of my entire life's work. Mary handed me a heavy, official-looking pen. Any final questions? I stared at the signature line, thinking about the house I'd built with my own hands. The business I'd grown from nothing, all of it, everything I had worked for, now hanging on Megan's willingness to finally get help. What if she tries to contest this? The conditions are specific and legally sound. Her addiction is documented through the bank transfers you provided as evidence. Any legal contest would require her to admit her gambling problem in a court of law, which, ironically, would only strengthen your position. I signed my name with steady, deliberate strokes. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Weighted with 3 generations of family history. Linda applied her official seal with a satisfying thump. The witnesses signed in turn, their simple signatures making the whole thing real, binding, and irreversible. One copy for your records, Mary said, sliding a thick folder across the polished table toward me. One for our files, and one for your safe deposit box. I held the folder in my hands, feeling the tangible weight of the paper that could reshape my daughter's life. How will the verification work? The treatment center will provide official completion certificates. For the sobriety period, we will require monthly documentation from an approved counselor or a certified testing facility. And if she never gets clean, Mary's expression softened slightly, then you will have the satisfaction of knowing your money went to help other families avoid what you've been through. The building security officer left first, then Linda with her notary supplies. Mary's assistant cleared the conference table efficiently, leaving just the 2 of us in the bright, silent room. Are you at peace with this decision? Mary asked. I looked out at the sprawling Seattle skyline, imagining Megan somewhere in one of those buildings, probably completely unaware that her future had just irrevocably changed. I'm at peace with trying to save her, and if she's too far gone to be saved, then I'm at peace with that too. Mary walked me to the elevator again, her hand briefly touching my shoulder in a gesture of support. Good luck, Carol. With everything. The elevator descended through 15 floors of other people's problems, other people's families, other people's desperate attempts to control the future through carefully worded legal documents. When I reached the parking garage, I sat in my truck for several long minutes, holding the folder that contained Megan's new reality. Tomorrow, I would call her. Tonight, I would plan exactly what to say. The drive home through the sluggish Seattle traffic gave me plenty of time to think. 3 days passed before I felt ready to make the call. I spent the time carefully planning my approach, methodically shopping for ingredients, and preparing the house for what I knew would likely be our final family dinner for a very long time. The grocery store felt different that morning, as if I were shopping for a last meal. I chose simple, comforting ingredients. A plump roasting chicken, fresh vegetables from the local market, a loaf of good crusty bread. I wanted nothing that would require complicated preparation or distract from the conversation that lay ahead. At the checkout, Mrs. Patterson from the deli counter asked about Megan. Haven't seen your girl lately. How's she doing? She's learning some important lessons, I said, my voice even. She smiled and nodded, blissfully unaware that she was probably the last person who would ask about Megan with such simple, genuine affection. Back home, I moved through my kitchen with a mechanical, practiced precision. The familiar routine of meal prep gave my hands something to do, while my mind rehearsed the phone call. By 2:00 p.m., everything was ready, except for the conversation that would change everything. I dialed Megan's number before I could lose my nerve. "Mom?" Her voice carried a mixture of surprise and profound weariness. "Hello, Megan. If this is about lecturing me again about gambling, it's not." I kept my tone neutral, almost friendly. "I've been thinking about our conversation, about your money situation." A heavy silence stretched across the line. I could almost hear her mind working, recalibrating, searching for the trap. "What about it?" "Come to dinner tonight. We'll talk." "Talk about what, exactly?" "Your future. Leo's future." I paused deliberately. "Your money problems. Are you saying you'll help us after all?" "Perfect." The raw desperation in her voice confirmed everything I had suspected about her current financial state. "I'm saying we should discuss it face to face. Like family." "Mom, we really need 7 o'clock, bring Leo. He's still pretty upset about everything." "Then maybe it's time to fix things," I said. Another pause. I could hear her breathing, probably calculating how much she could ask for, how best to play this conversation to her advantage. "Okay," she finally said. "We'll be there." "Good. See you at 7. I hung up before she could ask any more questions. The afternoon passed with excruciating slowness. I set the dining room table with care, using the good china and the heavy silverware that were reserved for special occasions. This certainly qualified as special, though not in any way I had ever imagined. At 6:30, I retrieved the copy of the will from my study and placed it in a clean manila envelope on the side table in the living room. Everything was ready. The meal, the setting, the legal documents that would either save or sever my relationship with my only child. Looking around the dining room, I was flooded with memories of other family dinners from happier times. Megan as a little girl, bubbling with excitement about her school projects. A teenage Megan bringing her first boyfriend home to meet me. A young adult Megan, her face radiant, announcing her engagement to Leo. All of it had somehow led to this moment. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times. Right on schedule, I heard a car pull into the driveway. It was time to find out if love could still triumph over addiction. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:00 p.m., just as I had expected. Through the peephole, I saw Megan and Leo standing on my porch, both of them looking uncertain but also undeniably hopeful. Megan was holding a small bouquet of grocery store flowers, while Leo clutched a bottle of wine. I opened the door with a warm, genuine smile. "Right on time, Mom." Megan stepped forward awkwardly, offering the flowers. "Thanks for inviting us back." "Of course." I accepted the bouquet graciously. Come in. Leo followed, extending the wine bottle. "I wasn't sure if we should bring anything, but that's very thoughtful." I gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner's almost ready." The atmosphere felt entirely different from our last disastrous gathering. I had adjusted the dimmer on the chandelier to cast everything in a warm golden glow, and I'd opened the windows to let in the cool spring evening air. The table was set with my good china, the same delicate pieces my own mother had chosen decades ago. "Something smells incredible," Leo said, settling into his chair. "Just roasted chicken and vegetables. Nothing fancy." I poured wine for all of us, noting how Megan's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass. "Remember when you tried to help me build the back deck?" I asked Megan as I served the meal, deliberately steering the conversation to a safer, happier time. Megan laughed, and some of the tension seemed to melt from her shoulders. "I was 5. That hammer was bigger than my entire arm. You were so determined to help." I smiled at the memory. "Every single nail you tried to hammer bent sideways. But you never got frustrated," Megan said quietly, a note of wonder in her voice. You just kept straightening them out for me and letting me try again. Leo watched our exchange with visible relief. You've always been there for us, Carol. I want you to know we appreciate it. Family is everything, I said, cutting my chicken with deliberate care. We work through problems together. Megan chimed in, shifting in her seat. About those problems, Mom. I know things have been difficult lately. I held up a hand gently. Tonight is about family. We can discuss business later. The rest of the meal passed pleasantly. I shared stories about building the house when Megan was young, how she used to supervise the work from her sandbox while I laid the foundation. Leo talked about his work at the law firm, carefully avoiding any mention of financial stress. Megan seemed more relaxed than I had seen her in months, occasionally reaching across the table to touch Leo's hand. Remember the tool shed incident? I asked as we finished the main course. Megan groaned. The one I helped you build that completely collapsed the next day? Your grandmother took pictures of you standing so proudly next to that crooked disaster. I refilled our wine glasses. She said it was the most beautiful shed she'd ever seen. I felt so proud. Megan admitted, a small, genuine smile on her face. Even after it fell down, you helped me understand what went wrong. You never made me feel stupid. Because you weren't stupid, I said softly. You were learning. The grandfather clock chimed 8 times, its deep, resonant tones filling the comfortable silence that followed. I could see Megan relaxing more with each passing minute, her confidence visibly building as she interpreted my warmth as a sign of forgiveness, a prelude to a bailout. Why don't we move to the living room? I suggested, standing to clear the dishes. I'll bring in some coffee. Let me help, Leo offered, starting to get up. I waved him away. You're a guest tonight. Go on, make yourselves comfortable. As they headed toward the living room, I began clearing the table, stacking plates with a methodical precision. Through the doorway, I could hear their quiet conversation, Megan's voice animated as she told Leo about some other childhood memory I had triggered. I loaded the dishwasher efficiently, my movements automatic after years of practice. The kitchen felt peaceful, filled with the lingering aromas of a good meal and the comforting sound of family in the next room. When I joined them in the living room, Megan and Leo were sitting close together on the sofa, his hand resting on her knee. They looked hopeful, united, and ready to rebuild their relationship with me. Coffee will be ready in a few minutes, I said, settling into my armchair across from them. Mom, Megan began, leaning forward slightly. I know you mentioned discussing our situation. I nodded thoughtfully. Yes, I've been giving it considerable thought. The anticipation in Megan's eyes was unmistakable. She had interpreted the evening's warmth as absolute proof that I'd changed my mind, that I was ready to help them financially. Actually, I said, standing again, let me get something from my study. Something I think will interest you both. I returned from my study carrying the manila envelope, now thick with legal documents. The weight of it felt substantial in my hands. I settled back into my chair, placing the envelope deliberately on the coffee table between us. Megan's eyes fixed on it immediately. What's that? This, I said, my voice taking on a more serious tone, is the result of my thinking about our money discussion. Leo straightened, sensing the abrupt shift in the atmosphere. The comfortable warmth of dinner was evaporating, replaced by something more formal, more final. Megan, you mentioned wanting to discuss money. Let's do that. I opened the envelope and withdrew the will, its legal weight making the papers feel heavier than they should. I had my attorney prepare some documents that address your financial situation directly. Megan reached for the papers eagerly, her face bright with anticipation. Mom, I knew you'd understand. Her expression changed as she began to read. The color drained from her face slowly, like water running out of a sink. This, her voice cracked. This can't be serious. Leo leaned over to read alongside her, his brow furrowing as he tried to process the dense legal language. What does it say? He asked softly. Megan's hand shook as she continued reading. She's changed her will. I can only inherit if I complete gambling addiction treatment. 6 months minimum in a certified residential program, I confirmed calmly. Followed by 1 full year of verified abstinence from all forms of gambling. Mom, you can't do this. Megan's voice rose sharply, a note of panic creeping in. I can, and I have, I replied, keeping my own tone level and controlled. The documents are already filed with the court. Leo continued reading over Megan's shoulder, his expression shifting from shock to a dawning understanding. Monthly check-ins with approved counselors, he read aloud. Medical documentation required. A 5-year deadline from the date of death. And if I don't meet the conditions? Megan's voice was barely a whisper now. Then the entire estate goes to the Seattle Gamblers Anonymous Foundation. I leaned back in my chair. Your inheritance will go to help other families avoid what we've been through. This is a punishment. Megan stood up abruptly, the papers scattering from her lap onto the floor. You're cutting me off completely. No, I said firmly. I'm giving you the chance to earn what you inherit. Leo picked up the fallen documents, studying them carefully. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with a startling clarity. This is exactly right, Megan, he said quietly. Megan spun to face him, her eyes wide with disbelief. What? Your mother is right. You need help. Real help. Not more money to gamble away. Leo, you can't be serious. I am completely serious. He stood, moving to stand closer to my chair. Carol, this is incredibly brave. Megan stared at her husband as if seeing him for the first time. You're siding with her? I'm siding with your recovery. He turned back to the will in his hands. It says here I'll receive 50-0, regardless of whether you meet the conditions. That's right, I confirmed. You shouldn't have to suffer for her choices. So, even if I never get clean, Leo gets money. But I don't? Megan's voice was rising toward hysteria. That's exactly right. This is insane. I'm your daughter, and that's why I'm doing this. I stood as well, facing her directly, because I want you to become the woman I raised you to be, not the woman this addiction has made you. Megan grabbed the will from Leo's hands, scanning it desperately as if searching for a loophole. There has to be another way. Their island. Get help. I don't need. Yes, you do. Leo's voice was like steel. You've been lying to me for 3 years, gambling away our entire future. Your mother is offering you a path back. Megan looked between the two of us, seeing her world, her entire system of manipulation, collapse in real time. So that's it? Follow your rules, or lose everything? Follow the rules of recovery, I corrected gently. This isn't about control, Megan. It's about love. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Love? You call disinheriting your own daughter love? I call giving you a reason to get clean love. Megan stared at the document in her hands for a long moment, then dropped it back onto the coffee table as if it had burned her. I need some time to process this. Take all the time you need, I said. The conditions don't change. She headed for the front door, with Leo following after gathering his coat. Thank you, he said quietly, touching my arm as he passed. I nodded, watching them leave through the living room window. Megan's shoulders were hunched in defeat. But for the first time in years, I felt something approaching hope. 4 months after that night, I sat at the same dining room table, but everything had changed. Megan sat across from me, but this Megan was different. Cleaner. Somehow. More present. The desperate, hunted edge that had defined her for years was gone, replaced by something I barely dared to call peace. The program director says, I'm making excellent progress, she said, cutting her chicken with steady, confident hands. 3 months down, 3 to go. Leo smiled beside her, his relief so palpable It was almost a physical presence in the room. She calls every other day now. Not for money, just to talk. How are the group sessions? I asked. Hard, Megan admitted without hesitation. Really hard. But I'm starting to understand how the addiction works, how it completely rewired my thinking. We had been having dinners like this twice a month since Megan entered the Pine Ridge Treatment Center in May. The family therapy sessions had been painful but necessary, forcing all of us to confront years of enabling, denial, and manipulation. I understand now why you had to do it, Mom, Megan continued, looking me directly in the eye. I was destroying everything. My marriage, my relationship with you, my entire future. I never stopped believing you could change, I said. I just needed to stop making it so easy for you not to. The counselors explained enabling to us, Leo added. How giving her money was actually just feeding the addiction. Megan nodded in agreement. Every time you helped, it just reinforced my belief that gambling was okay, because there would always be a safety net. And now I'm learning to build my own safety net, with real skills, real relationships, real responsibility. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Her eyes were clear, focused. The furtive, calculating expression that had become her default was completely gone. The financial counselor helped me create a repayment plan, Megan said. It'll take years, but I want to pay back every single dollar I took from you. Megan, no, Mom, I need to do this. Not for the inheritance, but for me, for my marriage, for our family. Leo reached for her hand across the table. It's been hard, but we're both learning what a real partnership looks like. No more secrets, no more lies. I have 3 months left in the program, Megan said, her voice firm with resolve. And I want to complete it even if I inherit nothing. This isn't about the money anymore. The inheritance was never the point, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Getting my daughter back was. Megan's eyes filled with tears. And she didn't try to hide them. I was so angry when you showed me that will. I felt betrayed, abandoned, and now I understand it was the most loving thing you could have possibly done. If you'd just given me more money, I'd probably be dead by now. The grandfather clock chimed 8 times, just as it had on that terrible night 4 months ago. But instead of marking the end of our family, it now seemed to be measuring our healing. The counselor says recovery is lifelong, Megan said. Even after I complete the program, I'll need ongoing support. You'll have it, I promised. From both of us, Leo added, squeezing her hand. We finished dinner in comfortable conversation about small, normal things. Megan's new job prospects after treatment. Leo's promotion at the firm. My latest construction project. It was normal family talk that felt absolutely miraculous after years of constant crisis and lies. As they prepared to leave, Megan hugged me tightly. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on yourself, I whispered back. I watched through the window as they drove away, Leo's hand resting on Megan's shoulder as she drove. They were rebuilding their marriage just as Megan was rebuilding herself. Slowly, carefully, with professional help, and a genuine, hard-won commitment. The will still sat in my safe, its conditions unchanged, but I no longer thought of it as a weapon or a trap. It was simply what it had always been intended to be. A mother's love, expressed through firm boundaries instead of destructive enabling. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Thanks for dinner, Mom. See you next week for therapy. I smiled, turned off the lights, and headed upstairs. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine, unadulterated hope for my daughter's future. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.